作为独立的国际学术智库，国际金融论坛见证了世界经济和金融的跌宕起伏和巨大变化，并伴随世界的发展逐步成长为有一定影响力的国际智库。国际金融论坛的创建和发展得到了200多位全球财经政要领袖的参与和支持，并且和50多个国家和地区、50多个国际和地区组织建立了合作的伙伴关系。
借助国际金融论坛这个平台，广交朋友、广泛交流，深入探讨全球面临的挑战与机遇，共同寻求合作发展之路。
Financing is critical. We must mobilize public and private finance to champion social and environmental change. It is encouraged to see this starting to happen.
国际金融论坛选择永久落户广州，对广东更好地参与国际金融合作发展，在更高层次上推进改革开放具有重要的意义。
国际金融论坛共同探讨世界大湾区的建设，为区域发展提取新动力，促成新增长，打造新格局。
国际金融论坛积极地响应国家战略，落户大湾区，建设具有标志意义的国际金融论坛永久会址，成为粤港澳大湾区国际交往的一个合作平台，共建粤港澳大湾区国际金融枢纽平台。
China and all the friends present here, we must join forces to build a fair, balanced, sustainable and stable world.
I particularly refer to mainland China, will lead the world in the future of science, technological development, manufacturing and sales of products.
We must all call upon all countries to rectify the present trajectory of dismissal of the multilateral system.
The presence here today of some of the world's most eminent policymakers and prominent thinkers is a testament to the importance of this annual meeting.
It is quite critical that a sophisticated forum such as this plays a role in direct financial diplomacy.
It's a very important international institution, an independent think tank based here in China.
We need to really connect One Belt, One Road and the initiative is being taken by China with the International Finance Forum, the IFF.
New capital, new values, new work. And I have to say that never such a dedication to the new global economy and global finance has been so appropriate.
As an international financial forum coming up with leading ideas that will help stabilize and revitalize the financial infrastructure worldwide.
To fulfill those heavy duties and responsibilities.
China has indeed shown the world
独立的国际学术智库，国际金融论坛见证了世界经济和金融的跌宕起伏和巨大变化，并伴随世界的发展逐步成长为有一定影响力的国际智库。国际金融论坛的创建和发展得到了200多位全球财经政要领袖的参与和支持，并且和50多个国家和地区、50多个国际和地区组织建立了合作的伙伴关系。
借助国际金融论坛这个平台，广交朋友，广泛交流，深入探讨全球面临的挑战与机遇，共同寻求合作发展之路。
Financing is critical. We must mobilize public and private finance to champion social and environmental change. It is encouraged to see this starting to happen.
国际金融论坛选择永久落户广州，对广东更好地参与国际金融合作发展，在更高层次上推进改革开放，具有重要的意义。
国际金融论坛共同探讨世界大湾区的建设，为区域发展提取新动力，促成新增长，打造新格局。
国际金融论坛积极地响应国家战略，落户大湾区，建设具有标志意义的国际金融论坛永久会址，成为粤港澳大湾区国际交往的一个合作平台，共建粤港澳大湾区国际金融枢纽平台。
China and all the friends present here, we must join forces to build a fair, balanced, sustainable and stable world.
I particularly refer to mainland China, will lead the world in the future of science, technological development, manufacturing and sales of products.
We must all call upon all countries to rectify the present trajectory of dismissal of the multilateral system.
The presence here today of some of the world's most eminent policymakers and prominent thinkers is a testament to the importance of this annual meeting.
It is quite critical that a sophisticated forum such as this plays a role in direct financial diplomacy.
It's a very important international institution, an independent think tank based here in China.
We need to really connect One Belt, One Road and the initiative is being taken by China with the International Finance Forum, the IFF.
New capital, new values, new work. And I have to say that never such a dedication to the new global economy and global finance has been so appropriate.
As an international financial forum coming up with leading ideas that will help stabilize and revitalize the financial infrastructure worldwide.
To fulfill those heavy duties and responsibilities.
China has indeed shown the world that rapid economic growth and modernization is possible.
IFF is such an important international forum to which I'm deeply attached. Never have global governance and international cooperation been so important as they are today. The world has no choice but to work as one if we have to overcome the immense challenges that confront us.
国际金融论坛日益发挥着非官方G20的作用，成为全球金融领域的 F20。
If we need an F20 to complement the G20, and I think we do.
The IMF and the IFF are connected by our global perspective and by fostering financial stability and sustainable growth.
The IFF has demonstrated its deep commitment to providing a platform for the international community to investigate the new globalization era.
I firmly believe that ministers of finance, the G20, and especially all of you, the newly designated F20, must become much more engaged in fighting this and future pandemics.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today to help launch our Green Finance Working Group. And we cannot be prouder to be joining forces with the IFF and our other partners to bring this initiative to life.
I commend your valuable contributions to global policy dialogues. So the theme of this conference, F20 Initiative, Reshape the Essence of Finance, is very timely.
Now I'd like to give the floor to IMF Vice President, Secretary General, former Vice President of the World Bank, Mr. Zhu Xian, to be the moderator. Distinguished leaders, guests, friends, good morning. Welcome to the IFF Annual Meeting 2022. Due to reasons of COVID-19, this annual conference has adopted online form. Now, I'd like to give my appreciation to those who are fighting the COVID-19 and all of our people. Meanwhile, before the official convening of this conference, I'd like to provide our condolences to Mr. Jiang Zemin. Now, the pandemic in the world is happening continuously with geopolitical conflicts, high inflation, energy crisis, food security risk are both increasing. The global economy's speed decreases. The old world order is being disrupted. The new world order has an unclear future. Faced with these unprecedented uncertainties and harsh challenges, how do we reshape the world strategy against this background and to realize sustainable development goals? With the reshaping of the world order, the new world competition, changes, and cooperation, especially the new developing world and emerging world, how would all these coexist and develop? All these must be addressed by dialogues so that we could reach consensus. Taking this opportunity, we're here to convene IFF, the 19th annual meeting, with invited delegates from China and the world to communicate and exchange on the above-mentioned issues. It is very much important. Presented to this online ceremony, opening ceremony, we have leaders from the United Nations and governments from the financial world, the delegates from embassies and consulates, from financial institutions, industry associations. So we have officials, diplomats, friends from the media, and academics. During this special period of time, I'd like to offer my appreciation to a hosting city, Guangzhou, and also the Nansha district for the free trade zone for the support. I'd like to thank their efforts to restrict the spread of COVID-19. Now we have a huge number of delegates from other countries for this meeting. Here on behalf of IFF, I'd like to provide my appreciation, heartfelt appreciation to them. Now I'd like to announce that the 19th IFF annual meeting officially convenes. First of all, I'd like to give the floor to the two hosting city delegates. The first one is the Vice Governor of Guangdong Province, Mr. Zhang Xin. He shall be giving us an opening remarks. The floor is yours. Distinguished leaders, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, friends, good morning. At this time, when we're here to hold the 2022 IFF annual meeting entrusted by Kunming and Wei Zhong, on behalf of the provincial government of Guangdong, I'd like to extend my welcome to all of you and congratulations to the convening of this annual meeting. I'd like to appreciate all who are supporting IFF. We've held 18th Global Annual Meeting for IFF in promoting the strategic dialogue, communications, and research. We have achieved global influence. The theme of this annual meeting is the ever-changing world, reshaping our shared future. We have been focusing on this complex global backdrop and focusing on how does finance better serve the real economy. I believe with your participation, this annual meeting will achieve remarkable outcomes. Financial industry is an important pillar industry in Guangdong. In 2022, the incremental of financial industry exceeded 1 trillion RMB, one-sixth of the taxation income. The first 3 quarters of this year, the incremental of the financial industry achieved 885.2 billion RMB, 8.3% of increase compared with the same period of last year. Banking, security, and insurance have top-ranking indicators in the financial industry in the world, and surrounding the construction of Great Bay Area and in-depth reform and opening up, serving the manufacturing industry as well as fintech, all this will and have already made contributions to the development of Guangdong. Guangzhou is the key financial city in the Great Bay Area. Last year's promulgated the 14th five-year plan for the financial industry has clarified that Guangzhou and Shenzhen would be the 2 engine cities to drive the financial development of Guangdong, supported by central government's financial institutions. Guangzhou financial climate exchange institution has been created, and now we have been providing a lot of support to the accompanying institutions such as cross-border wealth management and asset management centers. Currently, all levels of Guangdong are studying the 20 tricks, the important policies and rules from the 20th CCPCC meeting, National Congress, with the focus on the cooperation of the Great Bay, and the next stages in-depth reform and opening up, and promote a comprehensive opening and reform. And this will bring great opportunities to the global financial industry's development. Here, we warmly welcome financial industry's practitioners from other countries to come to Guangzhou to provide their wisdoms and contributions. At last, I wish a full success of this annual meeting. Great health, great career. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Governor Zhang Xin, for your opening remarks. Now the floor is given to the Mayor of Guangzhou, Mr. Guo Yonghang. Distinguished Chairman Han Sen-su, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, President Kristalina Georgieva, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam, Mr. Henry M. Paulson Jr., Mr. He Houhua, Mr. Zhou Xiaochuan, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure to see all the old friends and new friends, online and offline. We're gathering in this beautiful flower city of Guangzhou for the 2022 annual meeting of IFSF. First of all, on behalf of Guangzhou government and the CPC, to extend my congratulations to the convening of this meeting and a warm welcome to all of you, and our appreciation, heartfelt appreciation to those who support the societal and economic development of Guangzhou. IFF has 5 important annual meetings in Guangzhou. It has become an increasingly important platform to facilitate financial industries exchanges. This annual meeting's theme is the ever-changing world, reshaping our shared future. We shall be discussing how to reshape global strategy, achieve a sustainable development goal, promote the global change and cooperation against the complexity of backdrops. It is of great significance to promote consensus building. Guangzhou is a central city of Guangzhou, a gateway city, as well as international trade and financial center and transportation hub. It is a core engine city of the Great Bay Area. We are directed by the Xi Jinping's thoughts and implementing the new dynamics in old cities. And we have been grasping the high-level Belt and Road, a new round of financial opening, as well as the construction of Great Bay Area, and the extensive overall plan to develop Guangdong area, Guangdong province and Guangzhou. So the development of financial industry is a key area for us to co-build international financial hub of the Great Bay Area and improve the modern financial services and the involvement of financial ecology. The first 3 quarters of this year, the incremental of the financial industry achieved 201 billion RMB. September end, the balances reached 14.7 trillion. Ladies and friends, Mr. Xi Jinping on the 20th National Congress pointed out that China is sticking to the basic policy of opening up and reform, as well as the win-win strategy. We're providing new opportunities to the world and promoting an open world economy so that it could benefit the peoples of the world. We shall be carrying out the spirit of the 20th National Congress surrounding the service of the real economy, prevent financial risk, and fasten the speed of the setting of Great Bay Area International Commercial Bank, as well as the Great Bay Asset Management Center and the Wealth Management Center, promote the cross-border finance, green finance, as well as conducting cross-border financial investment, climate investment pilots,
and allocating better the capital resources in the world so that we can elevate the financing services in quality. And we hope to collect more wisdom and share more Guangzhou solution and China experience to the rest of the world so that we can make a better contribution in this regard. We also hope that you will experience the spirit of Guangzhou and share with us in the development of Guangzhou. Finally, I wish the forum annual meeting every success, great health, and great career happiness to all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Guo's opening remarks. And now, the next session is the opening remarks of the opening ceremony. And the first speaker is the IFF co-chairman and chair of Council of Presidents of the UN General Assembly, the former Prime Minister of South Korea, Mr. Han Sang-soo. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished board members of IFF, fellow members of IFF, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to open the 2022 annual meeting of the International Finance Forum, but at the same time, I'm very sorry that I have to open the meeting not in person, but online from Seoul, Korea. I would like to thank Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, and other prominent dignitaries for giving us encouraging, welcoming remarks. Although COVID-19 pandemic has been somewhat eased out, it has not been wiped out, and it is causing a lot of problems for travelers all over the world. I only hope that the health situation will be normalized by the time next year when we meet for the 2023 annual meeting here in Guangzhou. Ladies and gentlemen, we are meeting at a time when the global markets are unsettled. After a short recovery last year, the global economic growth outlook is increasingly difficult again, both in the near term and over the medium term. All three major countries, the United States, China, and Euro area, are slowing down with large negative spillovers to the developing countries. Global financial conditions have tightened as central banks continue to hike interest rates and financial assets prices have fallen amid the deteriorating economic outlook. Growth momentum in the United States is currently slowing as higher inflation and rising interest rates weigh on both consumption and investment. China is suffering from pandemic-related disruptions and the deepening downturn in its real estate market. The Euro area is severely impacted by the reduction in gas supplies from Russia. More worrisome development is that geopolitical tensions have raised the prospect that strategic competition and national security concerns may trump the shared economic benefits of the free flows of goods, capital, and technology, clouding medium to long-term global growth outlook. The global financial markets are showing strains as investors are becoming more risk-averse amid heightened economic and policy uncertainty. The global banking sector has been bolstered by high levels of capital and ample liquidity buffers. However, the faltering property sector in many countries raises concern about risks that could broaden and spill over into banks and the macroeconomy. Ladies and gentlemen, in this critical juncture, there is no room for policy mistakes. Policymakers should deploy the right set of macro, financial, and structural policies to effectively address macro shocks that we face today. However, more importantly, I would like to stress that the strong international cooperation is urgently needed to address the setbacks to global growth and climate changes. We are now gathering in Guangzhou in China, which has witnessed the benefits of open trade policies over the years. A quarter century ago, China undertook ambitious reforms that opened the economy to great competition and innovation, which led to rapid gains in productivity and tremendous increases in living standards. However, open trade and the global trading system are now under severe stress. Trade restrictions, distortionary subsidies and other industrial policies are on the rise. And dealing with them is made harder by geopolitical fragmentation. In other words, trade policy might become a source of economic fragmentation rather than a key driver of growth and integration as in the last few decades. Over the last few years, we have witnessed that an escalation of trade tensions among major economies incurred large losses in the global economy. We are now concerned more as even larger losses could come from technological and financial decoupling. That is why we need more stronger international cooperation. Most of all, countries should resume their engagement and dialogue with each other to avoid the most harmful fragmentation scenarios. When the international financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 was erupted, I was Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea. Therefore, I could witness on the spot the joint efforts of the global leaders to deal with the global crisis. At the time, all the nations of the world were strongly committed and united to deal with the financial crisis, eventually creating G20. There is no reason why we cannot repeat that kind of shining history of cooperation if global leaders were more open and acted more in favor of global goods. Ladies and gentlemen, IFF has to play the role to encourage the global leaders to come together for a closer cooperation. There are many topics to be discussed at the IFF Annual Conference 2022 from today. I sincerely hope that by mastering our wisdom and knowledge, we will be able to help the world to deal with the difficult economic problems that we are facing today. I wish all of you enjoy a productive as well as memorable 3-day conference. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, His Excellency Chair Han Sang-soo's opening remarks. And now, with a warm round of applause, I give the floor to Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Sir, you have the floor. Your Excellency, you have the floor, please. 各位阁下
This important summit. Our world is at a precarious moment. The window to prevent climate catastrophe is fast closing. Countries are grappling with the cost of living crisis, rising interest rates, and a looming recession. The Sustainable Development Goals are slipping out of reach, and the most vulnerable are being hit the hardest. We need an unprecedented global investment push. That is why I've called for an SDG stimulus package to provide countries of the Global South with adequate liquidity, including through increased funding from multilateral development banks and a wider reallocation of special drawing rights, to ensure concessional financing to middle-income countries in distress, and to create effective mechanisms for debt relief and restructuring. Everyone must play their part and fully align their business models with the 2030 Agenda and climate goals. International financial institutions and development banks must adjust their approach to risk and systematic leverage private finance for developing countries at reasonable costs. Public and private investors must phase out fossil fuels and triple their investments in renewable energy to reach $4 trillion annually by 2030. Financing for climate action must go hand in hand with financing for a just transition, including through investments in universal social protection, decent job creation, and the reskilling programs for the new economy. We must increase transparency and accountability to measure progress towards the SDGs and the net zero future. There is no room for any form of greenwashing. As we look ahead, we must transform the international financial architecture to serve the needs of today so that it contributes to reducing inequalities and restoring trust between developed countries and emerging economies. Together, we can meet this moment and build a sustainable, just and prosperous future. I wish you a productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. The Secretary General of the United Nations Mr. Guterres' special opening remarks. And now I give the floor to Madam Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, for opening remark. And now, Madam, you have the floor.
It is an honor for me to join other distinguished guests to address the International Finance Forum. Over the last 19 years, this has developed into an important venue to take stock of the global financial landscape. You could not be in a better place to discuss how to reshape our shared future than Guangzhou. This city and the Greater Bay Area committed long ago to share its future with communities around the world through trade and investments. And these deep ties have created great prosperity for millions of people. But as your team also notes, we are in an ever-changing world. 3 years of shocks have pushed the prices of food and energy and much else up and led to a tightening of financial conditions. And global growth has been going down. We project it at 2.7% next year, but with a 25% probability that growth may actually fall below 2%. And at least 1/3 of the world economy is expected to be in recession in 2023. The Asian Pacific region is holding better, but it does face multiple headwinds. First, financial conditions will continue to tighten as many economies continue raising rates to fight stubborn inflation, causing yields to rise and currencies to depreciate across Asia. Second, the war in Ukraine is disrupting energy and food markets and dragging down growth in Europe, which will hurt external demand for Asia's exports. Third, activity in China is held back by ongoing COVID-19 lockdowns and challenges in the real estate sector. Adding to this gloomy picture is the troubling trend of fragmentation, which will hit hard on Asia's open, trade-dependent economies. How can policymakers respond to this ever-changing world? In most countries, reducing inflation is a priority. In China, however, the overarching inflation has remained subdued, and that leaves room for accommodative monetary policy. To reignite growth, fiscal support to vulnerable households and strengthening social safety nets would promote consumption. Further calibrating the COVID strategy to mitigate its economic impact will be critical to sustain and balance the recovery. Recent measures in the property sector are also welcome. More action at the central government level can further help to safeguard financial stability. But domestic policies alone are not enough. We must also counter fragmentation. Splitting the world into blocks that stop trading with each other would surely knock off trillions of global GDP. Just imagine how many people we could feed, how many electric cars we could make, how many trees we could plant with that money. The world simply cannot afford fragmentation. So how do we rebuild cooperation and reclaim our shared future? By acting on challenges where working together benefits us all. Economic powerhouses like China have a leading role, and the constructive signals out of the G20 are a reason for hope. Here are 3 ways we can build momentum. First, tackle food insecurity. It has increased dramatically over the last few years, and today more than 100 million people don't have enough to eat. Addressing it requires international cooperation, also grants and concessional loans, as well as removing barriers to trade in food and fertilizers. The IMF's new food shock window contributes to these efforts. Second, act to reduce the risk of debt crisis. Large creditors such as China, the private sector, have a responsibility to lead. The G20 Common Framework has made progress with Chad and Zambia, but it must become faster and more predictable. Third, increase common efforts to address the climate crisis by reducing global carbon emissions and increasing resilience to climate shocks. Again, China has an important role to play on both fronts. But it is also paramount that globally financing for climate action is mobilized to scale and that public institutions step into leveraging private funds. For our part, the IMF's new Resilience and Sustainability Trust is aiming exactly for that, long-term financing to vulnerable countries with the main objective to open up space and provide incentives for massive increase in private financing. Last but not least, we need active dialogue to resist fragmentation. Constructive engagement between policymakers around the world, including in multilateral fora, will be vital to avoid the sharpest and most harmful fragmentation scenarios. None of us can meet these challenges alone, but with every act of cooperation, we can help shape a future that is more sustainable, more inclusive, and ultimately bringing benefits to all. 谢谢。
非常感谢 Kristalina 总裁的精。
I'd like to thank the opening remarks of Madam Kristalina Georgiana. Now the floor is given to the Senior Minister and Coordinator Minister for Social Policies, Singapore, Mr. Tharman Shanmugaratnam.
2022 International Finance Forum. It comes at a very difficult time for the world. In many respects, we have really entered a profoundly uncertain era. Uncertain economically, uncertain with regard to our ability to deal with climate change, future pandemics, and the other challenges of the global commons, and uncertain geopolitically. And it all comes together. But we have to find, amidst these uncertainties, we have to find new bases for optimism. We have to create opportunities to compete and collaborate at the same time between nations. We have to find new bases for stability and for growth. And it can be done by working multilaterally to strengthen existing institutions and build new mechanisms for multilateral cooperation. We can address the challenges of the day. We know what the problems are. We know that the global economy is going to go through a very difficult period, even after what we've been through in COVID and over the course of the last year. We know that the year to come is still going to be a very testing year. Inflation will be higher than normal for a period of time, possibly for quite some period of time. Growth will be weaker, and we'll face a situation where financial conditions will be tighter. And apart from central banks having to tame inflation, apart from us having to try to avoid a deep recession in many parts of the world, we also have to adjust to the fact that we have moved past an era of unusually low interest rates, in fact negative real interest rates in a large part of the world, and excess liquidity. And whole economies and business models that had been based on low interest rates and excess liquidity will now need to unwind strategies. And that will see some instability, some pain, some casualties, and we'll have to manage that well. But that's the economic dimension. Our largest challenges have to do with the global commons. We have to accelerate efforts because we are losing this race against climate change. And we are losing the race of preparing for the next pandemic, which will come and may very well be more dangerous than the COVID pandemic that we have gone through and are still going through. To address these challenges, we have to stop thinking nationally and think internationally. We have to stop thinking short-term and think long-term, because the costs of inaction in tackling climate change and future pandemics is much larger than the costs of action today. The costs of inaction because of future crises, future pandemics, is far, far larger than the cost of investing today to prevent these crises. And that requires a basic shift in mindset, thinking long-term and not short-term. But we also have to find a way of adjusting to a multipolar world in ways that are not constantly unstable and constantly full of friction. We have to avoid escalating tensions between nations. A multipolar world is irreversible. It's an achievement because it's how the global economic system has allowed for new poles of strength in the global economy. It is an achievement. But we have to prevent a more multipolar world from becoming a polarized world. That has to be our central challenge. And we have to make the best use of our multilateral institutions, including the international financial institutions, the World Bank and the other multilateral development banks, and the IMF. These are valuable institutions. We have to strengthen them, resource them well, and reform them so that they can perform their roles in a world that is very different from where we were when we first created those institutions. And those reforms are doable, and our ability to provide them with better resources is also doable when spread across countries in a fair and sustainable fashion. The constraints are not financial. The constraints are in our mindsets and our ability to shift from short-term thinking to long-term thinking, and to shift from national thinking to multilateral thinking. We can achieve these shifts. We can build new bases for optimism, even in an uncertain world and a profoundly risky world. We can, in fact, solve problems if we work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Mr. Shamagaratam, for your remarks. Now the floor is given to Mr. Henry M. Paulson, Jr., former Secretary of the Treasury of the United States, Chairman of the Paulson Institute.
First, a big thank you to the International Finance Forum for hosting this event. We're living through an age of increasing tension between the United States and China, growing disorder on the world stage, and mounting threats that are transnational in nature. And so it is critically important that there are high-level forums like this one where we can have dialogue and honest conversations about the way forward. I'm particularly encouraged to see that so many representatives are involved in this meeting, from Chinese banks, multilateral financial institutions, UN organizations, and international NGOs. This meeting is exceptionally well-timed. Importantly, the presidents of the United States and China, President Xi and President Biden, had a meeting on the margins of the G20. I'm hopeful that this will help stabilize the relationship and chart a path forward to manage conflict and work together where we have shared interest. My topic today is a threat to our planet's biodiversity, which is closely related to climate change, but it is even more immediate threat than climate change, and in some ways even more alarming. These environmental risks get less attention than geopolitical tensions and great power rivalry, but nonetheless, they are vitally important to the future of our planet and all of our lives. And they can only be effectively addressed if the US and China cooperate and work in complementary ways. Last month, we saw global leaders meet at COP27 to advance progress on climate change. And later this month, the world will convene in Montreal for the COP15 conference on biodiversity. In short, there's growing momentum to address these transnational risks and to offer solutions that can scale at the global level. And that's what I'll focus my brief remarks on today. I'll outline how I view these challenges and suggest some modest proposals that I believe can make a difference. As I see it, the climate and biodiversity crises are locked together in a cycle of destruction. Climate change is accelerating and exacerbating the biodiversity crisis, and in a vicious cycle, biodiversity loss is also contributing to climate change. The demise of the world's coral reefs offers an example. Scientists predict that 70 to 90% of coral reefs will disappear over the next 20 years because of warming sea temperatures, acidic water, and pollution. This will put at risk 4,000 species of fish and approximately 500 million people globally who depend on coral reef ecosystems for food, coastal protection, and employment. But while these challenges are interrelated, the biodiversity crisis is even more alarming than climate change. There's much more we don't know about the dangers of throwing a complex system like Mother Nature out of balance. There are no technological fixes to restore species that go extinct. And there are no cost-effective, man-made replacements for natural systems like wetlands, which provide protection against floods, replenish groundwater reserves, and filter the water that flows through them. So what can be done? Ultimately, it's far cheaper to prevent environmental damage in the first place than to clean it up afterwards. And there are many steps that can be taken that don't require a lot of money. For one, reforming harmful agricultural subsidies for forestry, fisheries, and farming would cost little or nothing. These perverse subsidies could be changed to still incentivize production while limiting our damage to natural capital. A second step is to improve our infrastructure planning. Given the trillions of dollars invested in infrastructure, it's important to maintain biodiversity-related risk management practices in ways that mitigate the damage to biodiversity. Third, financial investors and lenders should be required to do more to disclose the positive and negative environmental impacts of their financing and lending decisions. To summarize, in the areas where we can make the biggest difference, we don't need to spend a lot of money. It just takes political will. But properly valuing nature is arguably the most important task for governments over the next decade. There is a clear economic, health, and climate case for protecting nature. But just as important, there is an overwhelming case for preserving nature for its own sake. It's a source of much that is good about life: beauty, inspiration, innovation, and intellectual curiosity. I've always believed that a healthy planet is good for business, and for much of my career, this was a lonely position in the corporate world. But in recent years, something has changed. I've seen a new sense of urgency around nature conservation issues, a rapidly growing interest in the field of green and sustainable finance, and a renewed sense that collective effort can make a difference. One very positive example has been the way the Chinese government worked with the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the Paulson Institute, and local communities to protect and restore Chinese coastal wetlands, which were being destroyed by reclamation and development. The fact that the government acted to protect this vanishing natural ecosystem prevented the extinction of many species of migratory shorebirds and preserved other valuable functions. These include serving as nurseries for fish and shellfish, which are valuable food sources, serving as carbon sinks, and providing buffers against climate change weather shocks, including storms and storm surges. I'm optimistic that protecting and investing in nature can and will receive the attention and action which are so essential to the health of our planet and all of our lives. And the Paulson Institute and I look forward to working together with many of you to make a difference in the years ahead. We are pleased to be part of the US-China-EU Green Financing Working Group looking at transition financing. We appreciate your partnership on this very important initiative. Thank you.
Thank
you so much, Mr. Paulson's opening remark. And now I'd like to give the floor to Vice Chairman of the National Committee of the CPPCC, former Chief Executive of Macau Special Administrative Region, Mr. Ho Hao Wah. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning. It is my great pleasure to be here for the 19th annual meeting of the IFF. I'd like to start by extending warm congratulations to the annual meeting of the IFF and greetings to you all. At present, the world is experiencing unprecedented change and shifts. With the COVID ravaging the world for close to 3 years, situations still very serious. The inflation is still exerting great pressure to the world, with the recession of the economy imminent, debt problems, geopolitical issues, and energy crisis. As a result, the world is in a new transformation and experiencing fluctuations with anemic growth of the world. The IFF theme this year is the ever-changing world reshaping our shared future. With uncertainties and serious challenges, we're discussing how to reshape the world economic strategies for sustainable development goals and for cooperation in the global competition and transformation and shift. It bears great significance. Repeatedly, the central leadership of the country stressed the importance of the reform and opening up, as well as the Greater Bay Area development strategy, and also for Hong Kong and Macau to better integrate it into the national global strategy. In June this year, the State Council promulgated the Nanch action plan and solution for the portal and the new platform for the international development, as well as IFF as an important platform, especially in the annual meeting for the finance and IT innovation to be better connected with the region, so that this region can be a frontier of international cooperation in the world economy. Greater Bay Area is the most open and dynamic region in China. In the national development strategy of the economy, it is very important. The modern financial services are underpinning the transition and innovation for the future development in this area, underpinning the significance and imminent importance for the Greater Bay as a greater financial hub in the region. Thus, we need to be more proactively involved in the reshaping of the global financial competition and governance order, so that we can be synergized in the global green transition and sustainable development. IFF will celebrate its 20th anniversary next year. In the close to 2 decades, IFF, as an important financial services and dialogue platform, contributed great importance in promoting dialogue, communications, innovation, and the sustainable development future. IFF this year also has contributed to the State Council's Nansha solution with great input and wisdom. I wish IFF will base itself in the Greater Bay Area, especially in Nansha and Macau and Hong Kong, to play active role providing a communication platform for the financial and economic global leaders dialogue, making new contribution to the global economic recovery. And finally, I wish the 2020 annual meeting of the IFF every success. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Ho Hao-Hua's positive remarks. And now I'd like to give the floor to IFF Chairman of the General Assembly, Vice Chairman of the 12th National Committee of the CPPCC, and former Governor of the People's Bank of China, Mr. Zhou Xiaochuan. Sir, you have the floor. Secretary General Guterres of the United Nations, IMF Managing Director, Madam Georgieva, and Shadishardran Nanam, and Mr. Paulson. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great pleasure to be here. For me to be here for the 2022 annual meeting of the IFF. In the past few years, because of the COVID-related and geopolitical-related risks, as well as energy and food prices, facing these challenges, the world is facing more downside risks with ever more challenges and difficulties. The IMF predicts 2020 global growth will be 3.2%, 2024 2.7%. In the past 4 decades, the world saw 3.5% per capita growth. How to promote the global economic recovery back on track for more balanced and resilient development and growth, that is a serious challenge and focus of attention. Just recently, the CCP 20th Congress just concluded, during which stressed the high-quality opening up and development and growth for the orderly standardization for the more opening up and further reform. China will remain open and even more open. That is a determination, the signal we heard, providing more opportunities so that China will become an open economy going forward. Now, IMF is a world-oriented forum. The theme of this year's annual meeting is the ever-changing world, reshaping our shared future, focusing on the global strategy and also the future strategy for more communication and dialogue for the security of the global supply chain and trading system. It is very significant and timely. I hope to hear positive and active input and wisdom. The IFF 2022 Finance and Development Report for 2022 will be released. The report reviewed 2022 and looked ahead into 2023. The digital finance was also analyzed in this report. Additionally, IFF will also release the will actually confer awards for green finance, honoring those institutions with great green finance achievements, so that the climate change and the global governance will be further encouraged. This wording arrangement was spoken highly by international institutions, including the United Nations. This year is the 19th annual meeting, and next year we'll celebrate the 20th anniversary of IFF. I hope the forum will be based itself in Nansha and the Greater Bay Area, as well as including Macau and Hong Kong, so that finance for the sustainable development of the economy, for more globalization and global development, the forum will make continuous and new contribution. Finally, I wish the annual meeting of the IFF every success. Thank you. I want to thank Chairman Zhou's opening remark. And now let's continue with the next part for the opening. The opening assembly, the ever-changing world reshaping our shared future. I want to first give the floor to Mr. Xie Zhenhua, the Special Envoy for Climate Change. It is my great pleasure to be here attending this annual meeting of 2022 IFF through video. I want to first congratulate the opening of the annual meeting. The theme of this year's annual meeting is Ever-Changing World Reshaping Our Shared Future. The theme is relevant and meaningful to the ever-changing realities. The world is facing a series of great global challenges such as COVID and geopolitical conflicts, energy and food shortage.
So definitely we're now faced with a series of global challenges, as I just mentioned, and at this moment, the international community should stick to multilateralism, strengthen international exchanges and cooperation, work together to create a policy environment conducive to sustainable development and cultivate new dynamics. By implementing and promoting green and low-carbon technologies, we will be able to accelerate transformation and encourage innovation in multiple areas, including economy, society, security, energy, food, health, environment, and climate, to achieve synergistic developments. This is particularly important to address the current multiple challenges effectively. Among the various global crises and challenges, climate change has turned from a future challenge to an immediate one. Moreover, it has become increasingly urgent day by day. This year, extreme weather, such as heat waves, droughts, floods, and typhoons, have occurred in many different continents, seriously threatening the survival and development of all people and the well-being of future generations. Faced with the challenge of global climate change, no country can be immune to it. Multilateralism and win-win cooperation are the only options. Therefore, it is important to join hands to work together on immediate development and long-term transition by all the concerned parties. Every country needs to take concrete action to implement the 2030 intended nationally determined contributions and medium and long-term carbon neutrality targets. Strengthening the implementation of the UN Climate Convention and the Paris Agreements to accelerate green and low-carbon transition innovation and build a community with a shared future for mankind. Some developed countries affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the energy crisis swung back their policies and actions to address climate change and went back to fossil energy such as coal and increased carbon emissions. I hope these are only temporary measures for dealing with the immediate difficulties. I believe the general trend of the global green and low-carbon transformation and innovation set by the Paris Agreement and the 2030 United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development is irreversible. The world has already witnessed a new industrial revolution and technological change featured by green and low-carbon emission. I hope all countries will not change because of the immediate difficulties. Please continue adhering to the objectives of green and low-carbon transformation and innovation, fulfilling your responsibilities and obligations respectively, enhancing political mutual trust, creating a friendly diplomatic environment, and opening trade and financial order for international cooperation. China has always maintained its strategic determination and actively addressed climate change, taking steady actions to achieve the goals for peaking carbon emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060. China has also decided not to construct new coal power projects in overseas markets. The country has set up a leading agency to achieve carbon emission peaking and carbon neutrality goals, formed the 1+N policy system, and actively promoted low-carbon development and green transformation. Over the past decade, China's green and low-carbon transformation and innovation have been remarkably effective. In 2021, its carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP have dropped by about 34.4% compared to 2012, and energy consumption per unit of GDP decreased by 26.3%, with cumulative energy savings of about 1.4 billion tons of TCE, equivalent to 3.7 billion tons less carbon dioxide emissions. The cumulative installed capacity of new energy generation reached over 1.12 billion kilowatts. The cumulative installed capacity of hydropower, wind power, and photovoltaic power generation reached and exceeded 300 million kilowatts, ranking the first in the world. China plans to build 450 million kilowatts of large-scale wind power and photovoltaic bases in deserts, the Gobi areas, and uncultivated lands. The construction of the first batch of 95 million kilowatts has already started. China accounts for 1/3 of the global installed renewable energy capacity, and 50% of the wind power and 80% of the photovoltaic equipment components come from China. The country's investment in renewable energy has ranked first in the world for 7 consecutive years. The number of new energy vehicles has reached 10.99 million, accounting for more than half of the global fleet. Forest stock has reached 19.493 billion cubic meters, making it the largest in the world in terms of forest resources. Moreover, China aims to plant 70 billion trees within 10 years. President Xi Jinping stressed that China's efforts to achieve carbon peak by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060 were strategic decisions made by the CPC Central Committee. The report on the 20th Party Congress of the CPC clearly states that China should actively and steadily promote the carbon peak and carbon neutrality, and China should do so by basing on its energy resource endowment, adhering to the principle of establishing before breaking, implementing peak carbon actions in a planned and step-by-step manner, promoting the energy revolution, strengthening the clean and efficient use of coal, accelerating the planning and construction of a new energy system, and actively participating in the global governance of climate change actions. The statements again demonstrates a firm determination to promote green, low-carbon, and sustainable development and harmonious coexistence of man and nature. It also shows that China will continue to take action to achieve the goals of addressing climate change, achieving carbon peak, and carbon neutrality, regardless of the difficulties ahead. With the leadership and participation of President Xi Jinping, China has made a historic contribution to the conclusion, signing, entry into force, and implementation of the Paris Agreement. And at a critical moment, when global climate governance is facing twists and turns and difficulties, China has called on all parties to jointly adhere to the Paris Agreement and not to give up lightly. China has boosted confidence and given a strong impetus to the international community's cooperation in addressing climate change. China will continue to work with other parties in the international community to strengthen dialogue and exchange. And practical cooperation promote continued positive progress in the multilateral process of addressing climate change, build a fair and reasonable global climate governance system with win-win cooperation, and make positive contributions to accelerate the global green and low-carbon transformation and innovation, therefore to protect the shared home of all the people. With the support of the United Nations and other relevant parties in the international community, the IFF has been actively promoting One Belt and One Road and green developments for a very long time, founding the Silk Road International Association and the IFF Global Green Finance Awards. The IFF and Goldman Sachs also jointly organized the Sino-US Green Finance Work Group, which included 20 global enterprises. The IFF has also established the Global Carbon Pricing Conference mechanism with the Poston Institute and the European Carbon Pricing Task Force, together with 45 international institutions, including the World Resource Institute, the UNDP, the UN Office for Climate Change, the UNEP, the World Bank, the IMF, the AIIB, etc. The IFF launched the Global Joint Initiative on the Partnership of Biodiversity and Finance. The IFF has contributed to green economic recovery and sustainable development. I hope the IFF will continue its efforts to give full play to its influence and create a new platform for international engagements. I believe IFF will play even greater role in promoting the global green and low-carbon transition and international cooperation in related fields. Lastly, I wish the 2022 IFF Global Annual Meeting great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Special Envoy Mr. Xie Zhenhua, for your wonderful remarks. Now I'd like to...
The problems were largely different, and the situation of various countries too. Among this, which would be an absolute necessity. Third, it is crystal clear that there can be no efficient climate action without strong transnational cooperation. We know that at present, international relations are being badly deteriorated for various reasons, including the war in Ukraine, which led many countries to increase their use of coal. But climate change is inherently a transnational issue which calls for global responses. It is in the interest of all to put aside disagreements and tensions when it comes to this subject of fight against climate change. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres clearly said, we are faced with a choice between climate solidarity or collective suicide. We should keep these words in mind when preparing for COP28 in Dubai next year. It is particularly true regarding the main emitters, which are China, US, Europe and India. This reasoning also applies to other transnational environmental issues like biodiversity, with COP15 chaired by China in Montreal next week. Science shows that the fight against climate change and the protection of biodiversity are interconnected. COP15 is an opportunity to move forward. I hope a success will be a success at climate too. Ladies and gentlemen, climate disruption kills many, many people every year. And climate disruption cannot be the only serial killer whose identity is perfectly known but who remains free to act without being stopped. In this crucial domain of international climate cooperation, we should act more, better and more urgently and avoid two pitfalls, polarizing pessimism and naive optimism. We should discuss these issues, and particularly financial issues, with realism and ambition. With this in mind, I wish all of you very fruitful debates.
Well, thank you. Mr. Laurent Fabius. And now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Madame Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, the IFF board member, former president of the Philippines, and co-chair of SRIA. So now over to you.
The International Financial Forum. This current conference may well be happening amid a turning point in international finance. Certain global factors and forces which look set to continue advancing and impacting the world could dramatically alter monetary transactions, decisions, and systems. First and foremost has to be the intensifying rivalry between the United States and its European and Asian allies on the one hand, and China and Russia on the other. There is no way open competition between these mega powers and economic blocs would not affect the conduct of trade, finance, and investment worldwide. This rivalry has already seen Western economic and financial sanctions on Moscow shift energy trade flows and push Russia to develop payment mechanisms skirting the SWIFT system, where its banks are now banned. This impetus is prodded even more by the growing rivalry between China and the US. In fact, China has displaced America in the last decade as the largest trading partner of most nations. Plus, the possibility of conflict over the South China Sea, which could impose on China some of the Western economic sanctions hitting Russia. Every smart economist and his data science sidekick are now drawing up contingency plans for the rise of an alternative international payment system, possibly set up by the so-called BRIC countries and maybe even OPEC Plus after the latter was threatened with consequences after the oil exporting nations adopted output cuts of 2 million barrels a day. Another mega factor is the accelerating rise and spread of digital money, spurred by the explosion in e-commerce during pandemic lockdowns and the speculative frenzy over cryptocurrency. This may slow down somewhat as economies open up and with the current crypto crash. But the convenience, the speed, and despite cybercrime, the security of electronic payments, and the need for financial secrecy and freedom will keep digital money on pace to sweep away paper cash. Even without geopolitical frictions, alternative payment systems have emerged, most especially cryptocurrencies, for which BIS has been developing standards for their use in mainstream finance, and which have been adopted in varying degrees by central banks and major international banks like Goldman Sachs. The rising numbers and economic and cultural clout of the tech-savvy youth will further fuel digital funds. All manner of sellers, from corporates to cornerstones, target each individual by social media and other online channels. He or she will be given the technology to make purchases instantly and securely, anywhere, anytime, and with anyone. And among the fastest growing products are virtual goods, which not only require digital payments, but can also become financial assets, which again, digital finance is needed to store, assess, secure, and transact. How big is the virtual goods market? Adroit Market Research valued the worldwide market at $32 billion 5 years ago and projected nearly $190 billion in 2025, with a compounded annual growth rate of more than 22%. By market participants, Asia-Pacific is the biggest market now and will likely stay at the top by even bigger margins by 2030. Speaking of the young generation, demographics shapes finance. And the youth, not only more keen to explore and use new technology, but also more willing to invest in less established types of assets like crypto, emerging markets and currencies, and virtual items like NFTs. 2/3 of millennials believe Bitcoin is a safer investment than precious metals. And while 6% of people in the US own or have used crypto, the figure is about 10% in India and 32% in Nigeria. In addition, digital money offers the poor and the young, often unserved by major banks, get into the banking system via electronic cash. That's why the Philippine Central Bank has been promoting digital finance, including online microloans. And one surprising segment rapidly expanding the use of electronic money is Filipino women. They now lead their Asian counterparts in online and phone transactions. And as emerging economies with young populations expand, so will the use of electronic finance. The fourth factor driving alternative money systems is green investment. I will be presenting a fuller discussion of the green investment and financial implications of renewables in the session of green investment. One last but certainly leading factor is supply chain strengthening. Pandemic disruptions of industrial and logistics operations wreaked havoc on major sectors worldwide like autos, appliances, agriculture, and construction. So did geopolitical frictions, leading to trade barriers and economic sanctions. Hence, buyers, suppliers, and shippers are all seeking to devise more stable, reliable, and disruption-free chains. Among other measures, it means having alternative financial channels to ensure that all transactions throughout the supply chain can be done with no insurmountable hitch, including those with buyers, sellers, financiers, transports, and logistics. And given the globe-spanning production and logistics networks needed to produce or build all manner of goods, equipment, facilities, and infrastructure, the world of finance must devise a panoply of myriad money mechanisms to fund business despite wars, sanctions, pandemic, and other disruptive forces. Even within a single country, supply chain payments pose challenges, with one forum on business-to-business payments estimating a gap of over $3.1 trillion daily in outstanding receivables. As, and I quote, vendors still don't have much leverage when it comes to setting payments, terms, or even getting buyers to pay on time with the method of payment the supplier prefers, close quotes, reports the payments.com website, citing a B2B forum led by Visa. And two leading payments issues seem simple but are not so: invoice reconciliation and lack of supplier portals. Go abroad and the payments issues are compounded with cross-border controls and protocols, anti-money laundering regulations, technology incompatibilities, and other glitches and fraud. And that's before Western sanctions on Russia over Ukraine war and on China over Hong Kong developments further complicate things. Plainly, in the global struggle to right supply chain disruptions, alternative financial mechanisms must increasingly play a crucial role. Just 2 weeks ago, internationalbanker.com cited, and I quote, 3 significant payment trends in 2022. One is, I quote again, the normalization of digital wallets, unquote, like Apple Pay in America and Alipay in Asia, which will be used by a projected 4.4 billion consumers next year, more than half of the planet's 7.8 billion people, covering more than half of all transactions. Second is, again, I quote, continued maturation of buy now, pay later market, where digital finance would get more and more of the unbanked, low-income and youth market into the banking system, as seen in my country. And third, quote again, the increasing global acceptance and development of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, which, quote, aims to provide citizens with a risk-free form of digital legal tender backed by a central bank's assets, the most significant advancement ever of digital payments, close quote. Digital payments, alternative global currencies, virtual assets, welcome to the emerging brave new financial world. Money will never be the same again. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency Arroyo, for your wonderful remarks. Now, let me invite IFF board member, the co-chair of SRIA, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Madam Jenny Shipley, to give us her remarks. Jenny Shipley, please.
Greetings from New Zealand. I'm so sorry we can't be there face to face, and let's hope that 2023 will bring a new opportunity. We are facing unprecedented times. The war in Ukraine has disrupted supply chains globally and unsettled our confidence internationally. The geopolitical environment between some of our major players, including China and the United States, has caused anxiety and has also disrupted what had been a very sustained period of global growth and global confidence. Of course, the pandemic, which was so unexpected, and yet many predicted it would happen, although it was only a matter of when, has also meant everybody internationally has had to think in a new way. And we've been learning as we've been going. There's been no precedent for how we should deal with this, and it is worthy of consideration of how we shape the future around such risks. And finally, there is the international financial environment, which, because of these disruptions, is facing unprecedented challenges. All of these things together, over the last 3 years, have seen international monetary policy tighten within different economies and has had a very significant collective effect. But also within nations, as they've been confronted with the pandemic and other uncertainties, there's been significant fiscal stimulus delivered within these economies. We are now dealing with the result of these two measures, albeit that they were well-intentioned, and the world is facing a very significant inflationary environment, which is again having impacts on poverty and equity issues, but also inter-country fairness, and again all of the old arguments of the 80s, 90s and 2000s are re-emerging as to how we come through this. It is an excellent moment for the International Finance Forum to meet and consider what policies would be an appropriate response. In previous years, we've discussed an F20, and of course the G20, which has just been held, demonstrates that you can bring large and medium-sized economies together to confront and discuss the issues of our time. It is very clear that an F20, where if we could bring the key players from globally influential economies together to consider particularly what we can learn from the response to the pandemic and the other international pressures around monetary policy, government's fiscal policy, and the flow-on consequences of inflation, so that in the future, if we're confronted with these circumstances, we are well able to plan effectively. There will be lessons to be learned, and there is a transition and a recovery to be made. There's also another issue that's concerning me greatly around what this environment has created. Here in New Zealand, and I know in other international economies, the human cost of this disruption is significant. The issues around mental health, the strain of having to suddenly deal with things they didn't understand or hadn't had to confront historically, have had a big impact on productivity, on people's mindsets around what their priorities will be in the future, and in particular for children who have had hugely disrupted learning experiences over the pandemic. We may well be facing a cohort of young people who are incurring an education deficit. These things will flow through our economy and potentially have a big impact in the future. And so innovation and careful thought by leading people around how you can compensate or reinvest in a social investment sense to offset this huge and significant deficit, I think is worthy of discussion from a finance forum, not simply a humanitarian forum, because they will both converge. Indeed, they are already converging in many economies, and I would encourage us all to think through the policy implications of what an appropriate response is by industry, by the education sector, by the private sector, and by government. Finally, I hope that we will again move into a period where the sharing of knowledge is borderless. We again enjoyed 2 decades where everything seemed possible. The international environment was collaborative. The Internet of Things was opening up new opportunities. And yet here at the end of 2022, we find many of these assumptions that we were able to take for granted being challenged. This will have an impact on the way in which we feel we are connected globally and the way in which we share the future in a common sense. And we need to debate and discuss whether some of the behaviours we're seeing at the moment in international settings are anti-competitive, or indeed just facing the competition of nations, or indeed there are genuine concerns there that need to be addressed. These are different issues that we faced in the 80s and 90s, but they are having the same consequence of slowing down the global economy and making people anxious about whether they can be confident that the benefits of globalization that the developed and developing economies have enjoyed for 3 decades are at risk at this moment. I hope that this conference will not only focus on the geopolitical and regional opportunities that we have here, but find some of the levers that if we can get the correct leaders in the room, we may be able to be a step change again, to re-establish confidence, to redesign the framework that is necessary to overcome the hurdles we've discussed, and to give people a deep sense of a shared future together. I wish you all a great success as you spend your time over the next 3 days, and I hope that the deliberations will deliver results. I look forward to joining you in the not too distant future.
感谢。
Thank you, Ms. Jenny Shipley. And now, I'd like to give the floor to Sir Douglas Flint, CB Chairman of Standard Life Aberdeen and the former Special Envoy to China's Belt and Road Initiative. So now over to you, Sir Douglas Flint.
The opportunity to speak to this important conference. As I look back on 2022, to describe the year as eventful seems an absurd understatement. So many events have dominated the news flow, each individually significant and in aggregate almost overwhelming in consequence, both politically and economically. To name but a few, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the consequential spike in gas prices, the resurgence of investment in hydrocarbon capacity to build resilience, the dramatic collapse of grain exports from Ukraine, unleashing food shortages in developing markets, the sustained rise in inflation expectations to a 40-year high, an exhaustive examination of supply chain dependencies, and the restructuring of such change to favour proximate and friendly counterparts, unprecedented political instability in the UK, with 3 prime ministers and 4 chancellors within a 4-month period. The progressive unwinding of COVID travel and quarantine restrictions in most countries, but not in China. Escalation in geopolitical tension between the United States and its allies and China. Extreme polarization of political views in the US, with evolving predictions as to which candidates will contest the next presidential election. A global cost of living crisis, predominantly around energy and food, prompting unprecedented fiscal support for the most vulnerable. A collapse in leading technology company valuations, followed by the collapse of a significant cryptocurrency exchange. The list could go on. And yet, all of these events and uncertainties are relatively short-lived in their impact and manageable within historic experience, when compared to the existential threat that continues to grow, relatively unabated from failure to make progress and constraining global warming to the agreed target of 1.5 degrees centigrade. In spite of all the strong statements made around the necessity to do so, COP27 largely failed to expand on the commitments made a year earlier. The one major step forward was the launch of a fund for loss and damage to support nations most exposed to the consequences of climate change, but details and financial funding remain to be agreed. But against this backdrop lie the opportunities. Addressing climate change, both in mitigation and solution, requires trillions of dollars of investment annually for the next 3 decades at least. Reconfiguring supply chains, building security of supply for energy and food, replacing inefficient infrastructure for transportation and energy supply and distribution, funding the science base and applied research needed to create the solutions not available today, rebuilding Ukraine. All of these add further billions of dollars of investment demand in the coming years. Policymakers are at last seeing the need to unblock obstacles that constrain investment flows from long-term savings pools into the needed infrastructure and patient capital science-based assets. These shared challenges are also forcing governments to reconsider alliances, multilateralism, the role of the state versus private enterprise, and what obligations they must accept to support countries less able to fend for themselves. The concept of a just transition is gaining momentum. And notwithstanding geopolitical differences, there is considerable recognition of the benefits of a coordinated global cooperation to address shared threats. With the success of the coordinated approach to COVID vaccine development and distribution, evidence of what can be achieved. Initiatives such as China's Belt and Road Initiative, together with the Build Back Better World Initiative, the EU's Global Gateway Initiative, alongside the work of the AIIB and other multilateral development banks, all will have a significant contribution to make. But to be as successful as these need to be will require international collaboration to build the necessary capacity. So, as we enter 2023, we need to find a way to integrate or at least align these global initiatives lest they see strategic competition as more important than building the necessary global capacity. And since all the initiatives seek to attract buy-in from private capital, they're all chasing the same money. The most critical current opportunity is to ascertain how best to use public sector financial capacity to build private sector funding participation. So 2023 may well be a pivotal year for markets and consumer confidence. We must not allow ourselves to get distracted by the noise of shorter-term political and economic events and stay resolute on the long-term shared challenges that must be addressed to avoid the catastrophic consequences of global warming, including migration flows that overwhelm national boundaries. Thank you.
感谢范志廉爵士的精彩演讲。
All right. Thank you, Sir Douglas Flint. Now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mark E. Tucker, Group Chairman of HSBC Holdings. So now over to you, Mr. Tucker.
To speak today. The International Finance Forum is an important fixture in the calendar, providing a platform for businesses, officials, and policy experts across China and beyond to discuss the key issues of the day. and there are many important matters to discuss. The turbulence in the global economy affects us all, whether it's from inflationary pressures, conflict in Europe, high food and energy prices, the post-pandemic recovery, or the intensifying threat from climate change. But today I would like to talk about the importance of and the essential need for international cooperation, not only to overcome these common challenges, but also to build a shared prosperity. Without leadership and cooperation, global and regional solutions can neither be created nor be delivered. In the light of the constructive dialogue that's recently taken place at the G20 summit in Indonesia, including between President Biden and President Xi, I will focus on relations between China and the US and between China and Europe. These axes are the most important in both geopolitics and geoeconomics. These three huge and influential economies are more interlinked and interdependent than ever. These links are forged by many millions of activities of people on a daily basis in trade, investment, science, education, and the arts. I believe, in fact, I know from some 40 years of work in and with China that we all have far more to gain by continuing to work together, continuing to strengthen the ties that bind us, while making a concerted effort to avoid erecting barriers that serve only to make our people and our firms poorer. The most extensive links are in supply chains and manufacturing. As we saw during the pandemic and continue to see now, even slight disruptions to global supply chains have severe knock-on effects for all economies. China remains the world's leading manufacturing center and is also increasingly a leading consumer of manufactured goods. Large manufacturers in Europe and the US, such as auto manufacturers and tech giants, earn a growing proportion of their profits through sales in China, and they create jobs in Asia through their regional hubs and supply chains. This East-West relationship is not limited to making cars or electronic devices. It extends from fashion to financial services. Maintaining open channels for investments bring significant benefits to all. For example, in recent years, Western pharmaceutical companies have established a consumer healthcare presence in China, directly creating tens of thousands of well-paid jobs. Research shows that for each of these direct jobs, a further 4 are created elsewhere in the Chinese economy. As personal wealth in China increases with the continued growth of the middle class, connections with service-based Western economies will help them meet the growing demand for financial products, insurance, consumer loans, investments, and savings. Older, wealthier Chinese consumers with surplus savings increasingly want choice. They also want diversity in where and how they invest their money. This will benefit growth and common prosperity in China. History shows that middle-class investment tends to flow inwards, boosting domestic stocks and shares and infrastructure projects rather than heading overseas. And this will be crucial in tackling the greatest challenge that we face as a planet, climate change. Retooling entire sectors and businesses, building new sustainable infrastructure, and creating reserves of renewable power can only happen if we maintain investment flows across a globalized economy. This profound change in the pace and pattern and direction of human economic development is comparable and will in time be far greater than the construction of global railway networks in the second half of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century. Take electric vehicles as an example. China currently has 15 million electric vehicles, the most for any single country by far. By 2040, that figure is expected to be 200 million. This expansion will be supported in part by investment from around the world, and the EV expertise developed in China can help, indeed is already helping, other countries to decarbonize their auto fleets. Electric buses and taxis are already on the roads in London, thanks in the main to Chinese firms. To sum up, strong cooperation between China and the West is by far the most effective and indeed the only truly efficient way to drive mutual economic growth and to address our common concerns. The renewed dialogue between President Biden and President Xi is a positive step. So was the German Chancellor's recent visit to China and the prospective visit by President Macron. All of us should welcome China's active diplomatic engagement led by President Xi with partners in Asia and beyond in the G20, at ASEAN and around the world. I sincerely hope that we see more of this dialogue in the future, both bilaterally and through the G20 and other forums. Our focus must be on strengthening the links that exist between Eastern and Western economies and on strengthening an international system that allows goods, services and investment, as well as innovation and ideas to flow freely between them. For in the end, ladies and gentlemen, it is on such mutually beneficial exchanges that the economic health and indeed the well-being of all our peoples depends. As one of the great historic global economic connectors, the HSBC Group, straddling East and West, Asia, the Middle East, Europe and North America, stands ready to support the system of global economic connectivity and to help prosperity across the globe. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mark E. Tucker, for your wonderful presentation. And now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. David Schwimmer, CEO of London Stock Exchange Group. So now over to you, Mr. Schwimmer.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm able to meet you in Guangzhou. I'm honored that London Stock Exchange Group is a recipient of the IFF Global Green Finance Award. Enabling sustainable finance is central to our purpose. LSEG is proud to be recognized for its efforts to deliver sustainability products and services to clients around the world. The global transition to a decarbonized economy requires a massive realignment of capital. We welcome China's role in this transformation and its more ambitious targets for achieving carbon neutrality. Every country, government, and business must be thinking about climate mitigation. For this global transformation to succeed, we need new and innovative ways of thinking, including from the financial sector. Sustainability continues to be a key issue for investors worldwide. And we applaud the IFF for its longstanding commitment to discussing sustainable finance. We need to encourage and enable investors to direct capital to Chinese companies with strong green credentials. This year, LSEG's FTSE Russell reported that China already has the second largest share of the global green economy at 12%. China plays a critical role in helping investors meet global sustainability goals and continues to demonstrate great potential in green finance. Global asset allocations to green and sustainable finance are increasing each year. Investor demand for actionable, climate-related financial information continues to surge. To meet this growing demand, LSEG's data and analytics business continues to provide high-quality ESG data for driving efficient allocation of capital. Recently, our index business partnered with Ping An on the use of FTSE Russell's market-leading China-specific ESG scores to better enable investment in Chinese companies with superior ESG performance. With greater amounts of data at their disposal, investors are better equipped to discern which issuers have ESG considerations truly at the heart of their activities. Earlier this year, we saw the listing of Chinese wind turbine manufacturer and smart energy provider Mingyang Smart Energy through the Shanghai-London Stock Connect. This partnership between the London Stock Exchange and the Shanghai Stock Exchange provides a channel for innovative, fast-growing, and green companies to raise capital in both markets. It is an opportunity for investors outside of China to understand the companies, markets, and people of this country. And it is a chance for Chinese companies to build strong financial ties around the world, expanding their global investor base and boosting liquidity while still supporting the growth of China's national exchanges and economy. LSEG is proud to be IFF's partner. We are bound by a common vision to empower economies and to help create sustainable growth. We're looking forward to working together to achieve the green finance goals that will benefit IFF, China, and the global community. On behalf of all of my LSEG colleagues, thank you again for this honor.
Thank you, Mr. David Schwimmer, for your presentation. Dear leaders, guests, and friends, for the opening ceremony of the IFF 2022, I'd now like to announce its conclusion. I'd like to thank you for your contributions in way of presentation and speeches. Thank you for your attendance.